What up, you guys? Welcome to the channel. If you're new, don't be. Go ahead and click that subscribe button to be a part of the Witness gang, to join the Witness Nation. Now, let's get into this, shall we? Hello, you guys, and welcome to the channel. If you're new, don't be.
I'm Whitney.
What up, everybody? Welcome. Okay, so we're gonna get right into everything. My apologies. Okay, so to be honest with you, normally I do my long 10-minute wait screen, and that's because a lot of people are telling me that they're not getting notifications and they don't want to miss anything. So I just want to precursor to let you guys know the reason why I do that. It's not to bore you guys. It's just really to allow people that did not get notifications to come in to be able to witness a live. However, I have been having people say, oh my gosh, this intro is so long. No, that is not my intro. That's a wait screen. And I'm just trying to build up the anticipation and build up the time and giving people opportunity to be able to come in. Okay, I will be going back to that on tomorrow. However, I just wanted to just explain why that is and why it's so long. So know that 10 minutes in, I literally start on time. I never go over. If I do, I'll push it further back. However, if I say I'm starting at 6:30, I start at 6:30, and then I start with the wait screen for 10 minutes. So know that 10 minutes in, it will be a wait screen from here on out where it just shows commercials and things to that nature, my sponsors and stuff like that. And that's for those that are not getting notifications. I get that a lot. A lot of people are like, Whitney, oh my gosh, you're live. I didn't get my notification. So I just wanted to let you guys know what was going on. Yeah, I just wanted to let you guys know why that was. This has been just a long week with the passing of our family friend. So, but I'm just trying to work through it. And try to, bring you guys more transcript. It seems like I'm still pinging ponging off of Admis. So I'm going to leave off where he's at so you guys won't have to keep hearing the same stuff over and over. However, I did create my playlist for you guys to be able to get the order of it or whatnot. And then if you go on his channel, his is lined up accordingly, as well as mine. He's actually live right now. It was kind of like unexpected, he stated. Some exclusive news hit in regards to another YouTuber, and y'all know I don't report on other YouTubers and stuff like that. So that's what he's taking care of. We're gonna go ahead and get into these transcripts. I really don't have much to really talk about that's going on the outside. So I'm not going to hold you guys with much more. We're going to be reading from page 1599, and I usually read 30 pages there out from there. And so that is going to be no different. That's what we're going to be doing. Okay. But first I want to just tell everybody hello and welcome. Welcome. Hey, Nene. Nene says, hello, my Whitney Pooh. I'm so sorry I haven't been watching your video. I've been busy at work. We are short on staff, so I'm now catching up. But I do want to say that I'm praying for you and your family. Thank you so much. And it's okay. It's okay. It's all right. You guys have the opportunity to watch playbacks and comment. I'll respond. She also says, I heard about it and I'm so sorry for your loss, and I'm praying for all of you. Okay, I miss you, and from the sound of your voice, oh, thank you. Yeah, this is what's keeping me going, to be honest with you. Just keeping it moving. It's very hard, but yeah, so thank you guys all for your prayers. I'm gonna go ahead and get into these transcripts with you guys so we can get into this read. Okay, all right. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, Admis left off at 1599. We're going to leave off there so we can just get an in-depth little concept as to what was going on. And so we're going to start from there, okay? All right, you guys. So this is the cross with Arnold, Mr. Arnold. And if I'm not mistaken, he's still the employee, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it, okay? I quit. And so did there ever come a time when, going back to the South African tour, where you were instructed to mail an expensive painting back to the United States on behalf of Mr. Kelly to the studio? Miss Gideon's objection. The judge, again, I don't really see the relevance of it, but you can answer. Go ahead. You can answer. You can answer it. Not in South Africa, no. Somewhere else, yes. Where was that? I think it was in Ethiopia. That there was a picture that he wanted to purchase as we were leaving to go to the airport, and and didn't he in fact purchase it? Yes. Yes. Okay. And it was approximately around 300,000 or something, right? I don't recall the dollar amount, but it was expensive. And so you were tasked with the responsibility of ensuring that painting got back to Mr. Kelly's home here in the United States, right? Hold on, y'all. Oh, it threw me. Hold on 1 second. It's throwing me off. Sorry, y'all. Hold on. I'm just updating the pages that we're going to be reading, you guys. Okay. All right. I just updated the page for you guys. Sorry about that. I don't recall the dollar amount, but it was expensive. If anyone can see this, just know I'm not ignoring you. For some reason, I can't see no one's comments but mine. Oh, it's just you for right now. I think a lot of people are over there at Miss channel because he went live before I did, and he's also doing a reading too. So it's just you right now commenting. But yeah. I don't recall the dollar amount, but it was expensive. And so you were tasked with the responsibility of ensuring that painting got back to Mr. Kelly's home here in the United States, right? Yes. And did that painting ever make it back to Mr. Kelly's home in the United States? After I was no longer employed, after I had left working for Mr. Kelly, I was told by other people that continued to work for him that it did ultimately arrive. But do you have any personal knowledge that it returned? Only what I was told. And excuse me. And so there did come a time where was that this incident occurred that it's obvious that Mr. Kelly was upset about that, right? Upset about what? Well, he was upset that the painting never arrived after purchasing it, right? There was. I've had conversations with him where he was upset that the painting had not arrived. Okay, and so with that being said, and there was a fine that was associated with that, right? I don't recall. There may have been, and Wasn't that in or around the time that you left working for Mr. Kelly? Let me see if I can pull this up. Hold on, y'all. Okay. Sorry, y'all. Sorry. Um, it would have been. It would have been a few months prior to, no, in or around the time possibly. It was within the same year. And so, wasn't the issue that ultimately led to your leaving Mr. Kelly's employment, the finding for the picture? Yes. The not specifically, but it weighed heavily in your decision, right? The finding did? Yes. And so when the government showed you numerous pictures of people that you had described for them, these are people. Many of the photos they showed you were people that you actually hired, right? I have to look at it again to make sure, but I don't think I hired very many. Maybe only a couple of those people. Mr. Farnella, Your Honor, may I have one moment? The judge, sure. There was a pause. Mr. Larby, I'm sorry, Mr. Arnold. Did there ever come a time when Limp Bizkit performed at one of the studios on the roof? Dang, Limp Bizkit. Yes. And during that performance, there was a long line of women and men, but I mean, there was a majority of women wanting to see that show. I don't know the demographic. There was a lot of people in the parking lot and on the streets of Labari. I mean, Labib. Larabi, I'm sorry, Larabi, to see the performance. And that was something that happened regularly at the studio, right? Other artists performing and creating crowds. That is the only instance of somebody performing on the rooftop to a large crowd. And just to go back to yesterday, you talked about a black room, right? Was there a black room at one of the studios? I don't recall a black room. Okay, Mr. Fernella. Sorry, Your Honor. The judge, that's okay. When an artist was performing in particular, Mr. Kelly, regular studio sessions, it was expensive to do a session, right? I mean, it costs. Let me rephrase. The studio sessions were an expensive cost that Mr. Kelly had to endure while recording, right? At Chicago Track? Yes. Yeah, it would be a daily, a weekly, a monthly, or hourly charge. So it would be significant, and the clock always ticked. Uh-oh. And so there would be occasions where Mr. Kelly would be there for hours, even almost days because of that reason, right? Hey, Lakeisha, you're welcome, honey. Hey, Purple Rain, Purple Rain. Hey, Purple. You guys are welcome. I'm not sure exactly all of his reasoning, but yes, he would be there many hours, quite often, and I think you had testified earlier that you had picked up not only women, but you also transported Mr. Kelly's friends, right? Yes. Okay, and you had said that the instances in which Mr. Kelly played basketball, you took his friends back and forth from wherever they were to the basketball court, right to the gym. Potentially, I could have driven them, or they could have followed. And did there ever come a time when you picked up Mr. Kelly's friend, Keith Calbert? Yes. And you did that regularly, right? Or frequently? I don't know of the frequency, but I'm sure I did it several times. And you also took Mr. Kelly to and from where he had to go at times, right? Yes. And so is it fair to say that during some of these basketball events that his friends would be there and Mr. Kelly was working or tied up on work matters and they would have to wait for long periods of time? I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? Is it fair to say that during some of these basketball games that were arranged or coordinated, if Mr. Kelly got caught up with work and he was delayed, his friends or the people that were playing or intending to play with Mr. Kelly would be there for long periods of time? Yes, waiting for him until he finished doing what he had to do, right? Yes. And just a couple more questions. Hold on, y'all. Let me give you something to drink. All right, y'all. I'm sorry. This reading got me thirsty. Okay. And just a couple more questions. You had talked about a tent that was became a permanent fixture at the Olympia Fields property, right? Yes. And so that tent was used for large events, correct? Yes. And so that tent, and so that was, but there were many of these large events that occurred at Olympia Fields, right? Hey, Nikki, honey bunches of oats, pretty girl. Hey, Lemmy. You see, I'll tell y'all are some gorgeous people. Baby, what? Can't say nah. Hey, Amber. Yes, you made it, honey. All right, let me continue. And that would include shows or things of that nature. And there would be many people on the property. Yes. Okay. Let's go back quickly to just when you picked up guests, male or female in particular. You said female. You would put up the rear view mirror, right? Yes. And I think you said that you would pick up male guests, but with regard to the rear view mirror, you would only place it upright for female guests, right? To my recollection, yes. So you also testified that you drove the Sprinter, right? No, I never drove a Sprinter. You never picked female guests up in the Sprinter? Just to clarify my reasoning, I'm considering the Sprinter to be a specific type of van. And when I worked for Mr. Kelly, we did not have a Sprinter van. Did you have large vans? Well, a minivan, yes. Yes. And that minivan, did you use to pick up female guests? I would have, yes. And would you use that minivan to transport his male friends to basketball games and things like that? We could have, yes, I could have. So before we broke for lunch, I had asked you about security. And there did come a point in time when Mr. Kelly was resigning at Olympia Fields with his wife and children, young children, right? Yes. And do you recall the ages of his children that were living there while you were working there? Ms. Gideon, objection. I think he needs to specify a time frame. The judge, do you want to direct him to a particular time? Mr. Farnella, excuse me, Your Honor. There was a pause. Mr. Farnella continues. So, Mr. Kelly moved to Olympia Fields around what time? He had the house built. He had the sorry, y'all. He had the house built. I would be taking a guess that it was probably in the late 90s that he had the house built. I don't know for sure. And when did it become? Do you recall the year it became a studio? Before Chicago. I'm sorry, before the building at 865 La Robbie. I'm sorry, y'all. Sorry, y'all. La Robbie was torn down, and the studio was still the chocolate factory was still at the address. There was a studio built at his house. So there was one there before we actually moved the chocolate factory out there. But the chocolate factory, I believe, moved out there in 2004. Okay. And so did Mr. Kelly have children when he moved out there in 2004? Yes. And how old were they? I don't know their ages, but they were all young. I would say all under 10 years old. I don't know the varying ages, but I think his son was very young, maybe even just still an infant. I will be wrong. I don't know the ages. Hey, G. Oh, no, you're fine, G. We're still on Arnold, I think it's like the engineer dude or whatever. So, yeah, you're fine. We're still on it. So give what Mr. Kelly did for a living and the fact that he had young children. One, the security measures in place, also in place to protect his wife and children as well, and to maintain their privacy as well. Miss Gideon, objection. The judge, I'll sustain as to form. Mr. Farnella, I know the security measures in place during that period of time when Mr. Kelly's wife and children reside there was also to ensure that his family, the family's privacy was maintained. Ms. Gideon's objection. The judge, do you have any knowledge about that? He responds, I don't remember a specific instance. Where I can say yes, this was a policy, but it was understood that people didn't go into the house, and we stayed in the studio. That's as clear as I could say that right. But also, though the security measures were for his wife and children's safety as well, right? Ms. Gideon's objection. Do you have any knowledge about that one way or the other? Says the judge. No, sorry. And to the best of your knowledge, isn't it a fact that Mr. Kelly never held anyone against their will? Miss Gideon's objection. The judge sustained. Mr. Fernella, I'm sorry, Your Honor. Just one more second. The judge, that's okay. There was a pause. Mr. Fernella goes on to say, one last question. Hold on, let me get my charger. God dang it. I'm sorry, y'all. Okay, all right. You had said that you arranged travel, correct? Yes. And didn't there come a time when the travel arrangements were not exclusively your responsibility? Sorry. There were other people that arranged travel as well. Okay, so you weren't the only. That wasn't your only. That responsibility wasn't only delegated to you, right? Correct. And so again, you had testified just before that you don't recall ever finding any particular employee. Not at my own, not at my own decision. So when you worked for Mr. Kelly, were there occasions where Mr. Kelly would be in the studio all day and all night to ensure that he would get a song right or to his liking? Miss Gideon's objection. The judge sustained as to form. Mr. Fernella goes on. When you worked for Mr. Kelly, did he ever stay in the studio for more than 12 hours, maybe even a day or two, to ensure that the judge? I am just going to stop you because the question, he can't answer what the reason, what his particular reasons for being there. But you can surely ask him if he spent any particular amount of time there. To the best of your knowledge, were there ever occasions where Mr. Kelly was in the studio for days straight trying to get a song right? Miss Gideon's objection. The judge again. The question is okay up to the trying to get the song right. Mr. Fernella continues. Again, to the best of your knowledge, were there ever occasions where Mr. Kelly was in the studio for days straight? He answers, yes. Thank you, Your Honor. Nothing further. The judge, okay. Any redirect? Miss Gideon, very briefly. On cross-examination, you were asked whether the defendant's wife and children were at the Olympia Fields house. Do you recall that? Yes. Well, the defendant's wife and children were there. Were there also female guests who were present? Mr. Fernella, objection. The judge overruled. There may have been, yes. Wow. Wow. And you testified on cross-examination that while the defendant's wife and children were present, you would confine yourself to the studio. Is that correct? Yes. And you were there also female guests in the studio. I'm not sure. There could have been, but I can't say for sure. Not all the time. Sorry. I'm not asking about all the time. I'm asking at some of the time when the defendant's wife and children were in the house. Were there also female guests in the studio area? There were instances, yes. Wow. You were asked on cross-examination about the defendant incurring fees for time in which he was at Chicago Track using the recording studio. Do you recall that? If I said fees, I miss the normal charges, the charges for the studio time. Yes, my mistake. Yeah. But he was charged for the time he was in the studio, right? Yes. He wasn't charged for the time when he wasn't using the recording studio, but was at Chicago Track, was he? Well, there, he would have that studio all the time. So whether he was in the studio working or elsewhere, he would pay to have that studio still be his studio. Wow. Interesting. All right. So he was already just paying the whatever the cost of this studio is. He paid whether he used it or he didn't use it. Is that what you're saying? So when it was Chicago Track, yes, he would bill him we would bill him every single month for the studio time. But not only the studio time that he used, he was paying to have the studio time on reserve. Is that correct? For that studio, we would book additional studios in the building as well and pay for that. That could be a separate payment, so that could be a separate billing setup. But for his main studio, when it was Chicago Track before, when it was, yes, I'm sorry, yes, it would be billed monthly. On cross-examination, you were asked whether you trained new employees who started working for the defendant. Is that correct? Mr. Farnella, objection. The judge overruled. Was a part of their training that the employees needed to fulfill the defendant's instruction? Yes. You were also asked about the interviews that you conducted at Panera. Do you recall that? Yes. Fair to say that's a common practice to interview employees before they started working at a new job. Yes. And by the way, once the 865, once Chicago Track was no longer Chicago Track and it became the Chocolate Factory on North Larrabee, was the defendant billed at all for his time in studio? Hey, Cece. It's okay. It's okay. It's all right. Welcome, honey bunches. No. It was just his studio, correct? Yes. Okay. On cross-examination, you were asked extensively about times when certain celebrities were present at the studio. You recall those questions? Yes. Did female guests stay in their assigned location even when celebrities were at Chicago Track? They it would have been same as normal, where either we could have gotten a phone call to request for people to move around if there was a need for it, or would have gotten instructions to move people around if it was warranted. So fair to say, the presence of a celebrity in the studio didn't affect the protocols that you operated under with respect to the defendant's female guests. It may have changed logistics on where you would walk through, but the broader concept of the receiving phone calls and moving people around stayed the same. just to be clear, the broader concept was that the defendant needed to authorize movement around the studio, correct? Yes. Wow, y'all hear that? So if you came up in there, you couldn't just, hey, where's the restroom? Oh, it's around the corner. No, you had to have somebody actually take you to the restroom. Make sure you get there. Make sure you come back. They didn't want you to walk up in the room and see one of them girls or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Woo. Getting a drink. Sorry, y'all. You were also asked about whether your responsibilities, including stocking the refrigerator when female guests wanted food, you would not provide them food from the refrigerator, would you? They were called to ask for us to go pick up food for them. And you would go to locations outside the studio, correct? Yes, Miss Gideus. One moment. Nothing further. The judge. Any recross, Mr. Fernella? Mr. Fernella. Your Honor, just one moment. The judge. Sure. Mr. Fernella. Nothing further, Your Honor. The judge. Thank you so much. You can step down. Whereupon the witness was excused. The judge. Are you ready to call your next witness? Yes, Your Honor. Can we just have a 2-minute break? The judge. Oh yes, I'm wondering. I always like to give your break at 3:30. So we've got some. So we don't have too long a time sitting here, but I think we have to make a couple of arrangements. So I'm going to give it to you now. 10 minutes. Please don't talk about the case. Thanks so much. The courtroom deputy. All rise. Jury exits courtroom. The court. All right. Everybody can have a seat. Anything quickly that we need to resolve before the next witness? Miss Gideon. I don't believe so. The judge. Okay. Anything from the defense? Mr. Scholar. No, Your Honor. The judge. Okay, great. Thanks so much. Recess. Okay, give me a second, y'all. Let me grab my drink. Okay, sorry, y'all. Had to step away. I'm sorry, you guys. In open court, jury not present. The courtroom deputy. All rise. The judge. Everybody can have a seat. Ms. Shahada. Can we get the witness and the lawyer? The judge. Yes. Ms. Shahada, that would be by the first name, correct? Ms. Shahada. Correct. The judge. I think we are ready for the jury. Yes, Your Honor. The courtroom deputy. All rise. Jury enters courtroom. The courtroom deputy, you may be seated. The judge, okay, everybody, we are ready to continue with the government's case. Will you call your next witness, please? Ms. Shahada. The government calls Stephanie. The courtroom deputy, Stephanie, please stand and raise your right hand. Witness sworn, Stephanie. I do. Stephanie called as a witness, having been first duly sworn, affirmed, was examined, and testified as follows. The courtroom deputy, thank you. You may be seated. The judge, just a couple of things before we start. Our court reporter takes down everyone's testimony. So it's important, so it's important that you not speak too quickly and that we make sure that you are speaking into the microphone. And it's also important not to talk over whichever lawyer is asking you questions. It just makes it harder for the court reporter. If there's a question that isn't clear or you want to have repeated, let me know, and I'll have the lawyer rephrase it. And finally, just do your best to answer only the question that you are being asked, okay? Stephanie, thank you. The judge, you can take your mask off. Go ahead, Ms. Shahada. Ms. Shahada, thank you, Your Honor. Direct examination by Ms. Shahada. I'm showing the witness only what's been marked for identification as government exhibit 57. Do you recognize the person in this photograph? Yes, that's me. The judge, I think we have a mic. Pull it a little closer to you. I'm just not sure it's on. Miss Stephanie, it is. The judge, perfect. Yes, that's me. Ms. Shahada, I'd offer government exhibit 57. The judge, any objection? Mr. Fornella, no objection, Your Honor. The judge, that's in evidence. Government exhibit 57, so marked. I'm showing the witness only what's been marked for identification as government exhibit 57A. Is this the same photograph of you that I just showed you with your full name, with your first and last name underneath? Yes, my maiden name, yes. I would offer government exhibit 57A and to be published to the jury only, Your Honor. The judge, any objection? I'm going to assume no, Mr. Fornella. Ms. Fornella, no, Your Honor. The judge, okay. Government exhibit 57A, so marked. Sorry. Uh-oh. There we go. If we can publish it to the jury only, the judge, jury only, exhibit published. Now, how old are you? 39. And when were you born? October 16th, 1981. Where did you grow up? In Chicago, Illinois. And how far did you go in school? I finished a few years of college. Where did you go to high school? I went to two high schools. I went to Oak Park and River Forest High School, and I also went to the Chicago Academy for the Arts. Which of those two high schools did you graduate from? The latter, Chicago Academy of the Arts? Yes. Approximately when did you graduate from high school? Around June of 1999. And what kind of high school is the Chicago Academy of Arts? It's a traditional high school. For the first half of the day and the second half is there specializing in whatever art you're studying. So like dance, theater, singing, things like that. What were you studying at the time? I was studying theater at the time. And you mentioned that you did a few years of college after high school. Hold on one second, y'all. Sorry, you guys. Okay, one second. Here, baby, you wanna send it, move it? Or do I have time, or is she trying to get it done right now? Okay. Let me go ahead and send it over to you now. No, you fine. You fine. Baby, we in the same house. You good. I'm sorry, you guys. We're having to help my sister-in-law move my brother's body from one place to another. And so, one second. Pop, pop. It's the 8200 one, right? Yeah. Okay, it's sent. Okay, sorry, y'all. All right. Okay, I had to send my sister-in-law some finances. She's having to move my brother to another funeral home. Okay. Anywho, you guys. All right, let's finish where we were at. Sorry about that, y'all. What were you studying at that time? Well, I was studying theater at the time. And you mentioned that you did a few years of college after high school. I did. In what city did you do that? I did 1 year at DePaul in Chicago and then a couple of years in Florida. Are you currently employed? Yes. And what kind of work do you do? I work in the food and beverage industry. And are you married? I am. Did you have kids? I do. Do you now live in a state other than Illinois? Yes. Are you familiar with a singer known as R. Kelly? I am. Have you ever met R. Kelly in person? Yes, I have. Do you see R. Kelly in the courtroom here today? Yes, I do. Can you please point him out and identify him by an item of clothing he's wearing? Uh, he's there in the blue shirt. I mean, in the blue suit with a white mask on his face. The judge, indicating the defendant. Sorry, y'all. Now, how old were you when you first saw the defendant in person? I was 16 years old and at the time. And where did you first see the defendant in person? At a place called the Rock and Roll McDonald's in downtown Chicago. I swear, I'm telling you, a zebra never changes its stripes. I tell you that. If you don't know that by now, wow, wow, wow. Mm-mm-mm. Rock and roll. Wow. Anyways, let's continue. I'm showing the witness what's in evidence as government exhibit 520. Do you recognize the location in this photograph? Yes, that's the restaurant I just made reference to. Rock and Roll McDonald's. Now, who, if anyone, were you at the Rock and Roll McDonald's with the day you first saw the defendant? Um, I was there with my boyfriend, his best friend, and the girl that the best friend was dating. So it was like a double date. And the boyfriend that you were there with at the time, where did you know him from? From my first high school, OPRF. He went to that high school with you? Yes, he did. And where did you see the defendant at the Rock and Roll McDonald's? I was standing at the register alone, and he was seated at the booth closest to the register. And what happened? A man came up to me and he asked my age. I told him I was 16. He said, asked me, asked me if I knew R. Kelly. I said I did, and he kind of gestured towards him, and he said that R. Kelly wants you to call him, and he gave me a handwritten note with a phone number on it. And you said the man gestured towards him. Who was the him that the man gestured towards? To R. Kelly. And did you see the defendant after the man pointed over to him? Yes, I saw him. What was the defendant doing? Looking at me. What, if anything, did the man who approached you give you? He gave me a phone number and said it was Robert Kelly's phone number. And how did he give you the phone number? Well, he handed it to me on a piece of paper. Now, do you recall how the number was written? No. What, if anything, did you do after receiving the piece of paper with the defendant's phone number on it? I talked to my boyfriend and friends about it and then threw away the phone number. Why did you throw away the phone number? Because I didn't intend on to call him. Did you actually meet the defendant at a later time? I did. Around when was that? A year later, the summer of 1999. How old were you then? 17. I'm sure that the witness only was been marked. Actually, I'm sorry. One moment. Going back to the day you saw the defendant at the Rock and Roll McDonald's. Yes. How old were you then? 16. I'm showing the witness only what's been marked for identification as government exhibit 244. And before I ask you a question about that, do you remember approximately what time of year it was when you were at the Rock and Roll McDonald's and saw the defendant? It was summertime. And what year of 1998? I'm showing you what's been marked for identification as government exhibit 244. Do you recognize this? Yes, that's me in the same summer of 1998. That's a photo of you from the summer of 1998. Yes. I moved admit government exhibit 244. Mr. Farnella, no objection. The judge, okay, that's in evidence. You can display it. Government exhibit 244, so marked. Ms. Shahada, thank you. The judge, you want that jury only? Ms. Shahada, jury only, please. Exhibit published. All right. I think you had just testified that you actually met the defendant approximately a year later. Is that right? Yes. And how old were you then? 17. And what time of year was it that you met him? It was the summer of 1999. And was that near the time of year? I mean, was that near the time of your high school graduation? Yes. I'm showing the witness only what's been marked for identification as Government Exhibit 243. Do you recognize this photo? Yes. That's me on the day of my graduation in 1999. The day of your high school graduation? Yes. The government moves to admit 243, the court. Any objection? Mr. Darnella. No objection, Your Honor. The judge. That will be just for jury only? Ms. Shahada. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Government Exhibit 243, so marked. Exhibit published. Now, the summer after your high school graduation, where, if anywhere, were you working that summer? I worked at a hotel in downtown Chicago. What did you do at that hotel? I worked in the coffee shop. I was a barista. Do you recall what your shift was when you worked there? I had to open the barista station at 5 a.m., so I'd have to be there at 5, and I think it ended around 2. And that summer, 1999, where were you living? I lived in 2 places, part-time in Oak Park, which is just outside of the city, and then also part-time in the city with my friends in an apartment. When you lived part-time in Oak Park, who was that with? With my aunt. And when you lived in the city, who was that with? With 2 friends of mine that I went to high school with, named Catherine and Jesse. And was the apartment with your friends closer to your summer job? Yes. You mentioned you were living in that apartment with 2 friends, one of whom was named Catherine. Is that right? That's correct. Without saying it, do you know Catherine's full name? I do. I'm showing the witness only what's been marked for identification as Government Exhibit 952. Do you recognize that name? Yes, that's her full name. Catherine's full name? Yes. I move to admit Government Exhibit 952 to the jury only. Any objection? The judge asked. Mr. Fornella, no objection, Your Honor. The judge, that will be in evidence just for the jury. Government Exhibit 952, so marked. Exhibit published. Did you and Catherine go to the same high school? We did. And was that at the Chicago Academy of the Arts? That's correct. What, if any, career aspirations did Catherine have at that time? Catherine was a singer. And did she want to pursue that as a career? Yes, she did. How did you end up meeting the defendant in the summer of 1999? When I was at work at the hotel, a coworker came in and told us that R. Kelly was having an event at the Nike store, which was just around the corner from the hotel that I worked at. And after you learned that information, what, if anything, did you do? I decided I would go over to see if he would remember me, in order to ask him if he would listen to my friend sing. And which friend was that? Catherine. Do you recall where that Nike store was located? It's on Michigan Avenue in downtown Chicago. is Michigan Avenue in Chicago, also known as the Magnificent Mile? Yes. What, if anything, did you do once you had this information? I walked over to the store in order to see him or meet him, and as I arrived, he was coming out. So, when you say he, are you referring to the defendant? Yes, Mr. Kelly was coming out of the store as I was walking in. So it was the perfect opportunity to get his attention. And so I did. What happened? Then I asked him if he remembered me, and he said, yeah. And something, kind of very quickly, it was just like, yeah. And I said, I wanted to ask you a question. And he said, yeah, walk with me to my car and we can talk. And I said, okay. So did you walk with the defendant to his car? I did. And what happened then? I asked if he would meet my friend Catherine, who had a great voice, and I thought that maybe he could help her with her career. And where did that conversation happen? It took place in his car. I was sitting in the passenger seat at that point. So I think you indicated you saw the defendant as he was walking out of the Nike store. Yes. Then his car was very close. So was very close by. So we were quickly to the car, and the conversation occurred in the car. Did he invite you in the car? He did. And how if at all did the defendant respond when you told him about listening to your friend sing? He said, yeah, he thought we could arrange that, but he liked to get to know me. And he also said that he likes to cuddle, and would I be okay with that? To which I said yes. What happened next? He gave me a phone number and said to call him, and so I did. Did you see the defendant again after that? I did. I met him at the studio, at his studio. Now, approximately how long after you met the defendant at the Nike store did you see him again? Hey, Keely. Within a week or two. And what was going on in your life at that time? That was definitely the hardest time of my life. I had a very low self-esteem. I had already been through sexual trauma and abuse within my family, by my first boss, by men on the street. It was the hardest time of my life. I was very vulnerable. Hey, hey, sincerity. Okay. We're talking about Stephanie. This is the young lady who actually was trying to get her friend to like audition for him, but he was more interested in her. And she met him when she was 16 with her boyfriend, and then she threw away his number. And then they met up again while he was at a shoe store. Objection, Your Honor. The judge overruled. Now you said you went to the studio. Is that right? Yes. Do you recall where the studio was located? Yes. It was just off of Chicago Avenue and right in Cabernet Green. Right on the edge of Cabernet Green. You're welcome, Keely. Is Cabernet Green a neighborhood in Chicago? Yes. Do you recall around what time of day it was that you went to the studio? Well, it was the afternoon. Um, what happened when you got, well, withdraw? How was it that you ended up going to the studio that day? Hey, Joey. Hey, Joey. It's okay, babe. It's really actually now getting interesting. All the beginning was just kind of kerfuffle, but it's getting very interesting now. Now we get into another like person that actually experienced R. Kelly. What do you mean? Had you communicated with the defendant prior to going to the studio that day? Oh, yes. So I spoke with him. He told me where to meet him, and I arrived on a bus. I walked off the bus and over to the studio. And how did you get into the studio? There was a buzzer. Hey, Freebird, don't worry, y'all. This is really that we're really getting in the gist of things, in the gust of things. This is actually Stephanie. She met R. Kelly initially with her boyfriend at McDonald's, at the Rock and Roll McDonald's that he frequents. However, she wasn't interested in him, so she discarded his number. However, she had a friend that was musically talented, and so that she overheard that he was going to be at at the shoe store or whatever, right? And so she went up to the shoe store because she wanted to talk to him about possibly auditioning with her friend Catherine. When she did that, he agreed. However, he was like telling her that he was more so into her, and basically, he would audition her if basically she kind of you know got into him as well. There was a buzzer, like an intercom outside, and so someone that worked there let me in. After you were let in, where, if anywhere, did you go? I was brought up to the second floor to a waiting room or like a lounge room. And can you describe, well, first, who brought you up to the room? An employee. And can you describe the room you were taken to? Yeah, it was a room at the end of a hallway. There were two sofas in it, and there was a bathroom attached to that same room. What floor of the studio was it on? Second floor. What, if anything, did the employee who took you to that room tell you once you got there? To stay here and wait for him. And by him, who are you referring to? Robert Kelly. Did the employee then leave? Yes. And were you alone in that room? I was. How long did you stay in the room waiting for the defendant? I waited there for a few hours. Oh my goodness. And after a few hours, what happened? He arrived. He came in and sat down next to me, the defendant. Yes. And what do you recall happening next? He came and sat down right next to me and laid his head on my shoulder and said he was sorry that he took so long. And I said it was fine. And there was a little bit of chit chat, and we had sex that day. How old were you at the time? 17. And who initiated the sexual intercourse that day? He did. Apart from having sex with the defendant that day, did he say anything? Do you recall anything about the conversation or chit chat you had with him that day? He said that he wanted me to call him daddy. Did you continue to see the defendant after that day? I did. For about how long? For about 6 months. And about during those approximately 6 months, about how often did you and the defendant see each other? about 6 to 8 times per month. And where generally did you mostly see the defendant? Mostly it was at the studio in that same room that I just described. So the same studio as the one you went to the first time. Yes. I'm going to show you what's in evidence as Government Exhibit 525U. Do you recognize this? Yes, that's the exterior of the studio. Keely says, I don't understand why people sit there that long waiting. I would have left. Right? I guess, I mean, it was really kind of like nothing to really trip over. You're in like a studio room, so it's kind of like you just kind of just chilling. You don't know what the protocol and procedure is. I mean, so maybe she just didn't feel like it was a big thing. She probably had her phone. She probably was looking on her phone, just not really paying too much attention. You know what I'm saying? You never know. Yes, that's the exterior of the studio. I mean, you testified earlier about a call box to enter. Do you see that in this photograph? Yes. Yes, I do. And is it where I'm pointing my pen? Yes. Towards the middle left of the photo? Yes. I'm showing you what's in evidence as Government Exhibit 525P. Do you recognize this? Yes, I do. What is this? That's the room that I waited in. And is this the room where you regularly saw the defendant? Yes. I'm showing you what's in evidence as 525K. Is this just another photograph of that room? Yes. And you mentioned the room had a bathroom attached. Is that right? Yes. I'm showing you what's in evidence as Government Exhibit 525J. Do you recognize this? Yeah, that's the restroom. Now, in the course of the approximately 6 months that you saw the defendant, what were the different ways you got to the studio? Public transportation. Also, I was picked up at times by an employee of his. And sorry, there might have been a taxi here and there. And when you would leave the studio, what were the different methods you would use to leave? I'd get dropped off by an employee of his, or at certain points later in the relationship, I had a car I could drive. And you mentioned sometimes you were picked up or dropped off by an employee. What type, if any, what type of employee do you recall picking up or dropping you off sometimes? I assume it was a security person or a driver. And what led you to that conclusion? Because that's the capacity in which I would see them around, either like with him when we were walking around or driving us around. And do you remember any particular security employees the defendant had working for him at the time you saw him? I do remember one that I saw almost every time. I don't remember his name. And do you remember what he looks like? I do remember what he looks like. Can you describe him? Yes, he was a black man, either short hair or bald. Very friendly face. Um, I'm showing the witness what's in evidence as Government Exhibit 23. Do you recognize this individual? Yes, that's the man that I'm referring to. Now, over the course of the approximately 6 months that you saw the defendant, what were your interactions with him like? Um, it would vary. He was one of two ways. He was either very nice and charming, Duvolle, or he was very controlling, intimidating. He'd raise his voice at me, and he could, you know, put the fear of God in me very quickly. And you mentioned there were two sides. What, if anything, in your experience, would cause the defendant to go from one side to the other? It was hard to know what would do it, but like, for example, there was a time where that security, the driver, the person that you just showed me the picture of, hey Ernestine, he wasn't there, and he had been like every single time, yeah, every single time we hung out, his man was there. He'd either pick me up or he'd be in the car with us or whatever. And at one point, he wasn't there. And I said, oh, where's the guy? He always here. And it's just like casual. And he immediately is like, what the fuck did you just say? Don't ever fucking ask. Don't ever fucking ask about another man to me. Like, mind your own business. Don't ever ask no stupid ass questions like that. And terrified me. I didn't know that would set him off. So it was times like that. Now, during the approximately 6 months that you saw the defendant, how often did the defendant have sex with you? Every time. Every time you saw each other? Yes. And what was sex with the defendant like? It was humiliating. He would be very specific in how he wanted me to be. He would put me in positions that he wanted me to be in. He would tell me that he wanted me. He'd tell me to get undressed, and then he would position my body in a way, and he would then say, all right, I'm going to go. And when I come back, I want you to be just like this. So I would just be completely naked with my butt in the air and just like waiting there for him to come have his way. Mm, mm, mm. And how long would you have to wait sometimes? Sometimes hours. And what if anything happened when the defendant returned and you weren't in that position he had told you to be in? He would become very angry with me, yelling at me. What the fuck? I told you to do it like this. And he be very disappointed and angry. He would often ejaculate on my face. He orchestrated the sounds that I would make. Ugh. What do you mean by that? He would want me to moan Like if I made a sound, he would say, no, don't do it like that. Make this kind of sound. Now, you mentioned he would often ejaculate on your face. How did that make you feel? Disgusted? Lesson? Lesson? Now, you testified earlier that when you first met the defendant, you told him about your friend, Catherine, and that she was a singer. Yes. Did the defendant ever meet your friend, Catherine? He did. And how did that come about? I asked him if he would meet with her. He said that would, he said that would be fine, and to bring her to the studio. And about how long had you been seeing the defendant at that point? It was pretty early on. I would say within the first month or two. And after you had that conversation with the defendant, who, if anyone, did you take to the studio? I brought Catherine with me, and my mom came with us as well. Why did your mom come with you to the studio? My mom came with us because she had seen a ring that Mr. Kelly gave me, and it looked like an engagement ring, but it wasn't an engagement ring. He didn't propose marriage to me or anything like that, but she thought that that was inappropriate, and she wanted to see what the dynamic was between him and I. Wow. Wow. Interesting. And when your mom noticed that ring, what, if anything, did you tell your mom about the circumstances of how you got that ring? I just said that he had given it to me, and that we were friends, and it really wasn't a big deal. I didn't want her to know what was going on between him and I. Wow. Sounds like the same in a lot of cases where they didn't tell. They didn't tell their parents. So the parents had no idea. However, me as a parent and this old grown man giving my child a ring, it wouldn't be no, I want to meet him and see what his actions are. It would be, you're not going back. Period. That's just me. And had you and the defendant had sex at that point? Yes. And did you keep that from your mom? Yes, I did. Now, turning back to the day that Catherine and your mom went to the defendant's studio. What happened at the studio after Catherine and your mom arrived? We were brought up to a music room, a room in which he records music, and she performed in that room. My mom and I sat and watched. When you say she, who are you referring to? Catherine. And when you say she performed, what did she do? She sang the song for him, for the defendant. Yes, for Mr. Kelly. And how, if at all, did the defendant react? He said that she couldn't sing. And then we were quickly dismissed because he wasn't thrilled about my mom being with us. Wow. Mm, mm, mm. So about how long were you in the studio on that occasion, if you recall? About an hour, maybe even less. Do you recall seeing any of the Defendants Associates that day at the studio when your mom and Catherine were there? I don't remember. Other than the security individual that you identified earlier, do you recall meeting any other people associated with the defendant? Yes. Who do you recall meeting? There were two rappers that were around pretty often. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. And what were their names? Boo and Gotti. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. That list is just growing, ain't it? And I'm going to show you what's in evidence as Government Exhibit 8. Do you recognize this picture? I mean, this person? I do. Who is that? That is Blackie, who was introduced to me as Robert's cousin / manager. And who introduced you to him? Mr. Kelly did. Do you recall whether your friend Catherine ever met Blackie? She did meet him. Do you recall where she first met him? I believe it was at the studio, but I'm not positive. Other than the audition or the singing of the song that Catherine did for the defendant, did the defendant have any other involvement regarding Catherine and her music? No. Now, at some point after you met the defendant, did you and the defendant talk about your age? Yes. And about how long after you met him at the Nike store was that? It was either the first or second time that we got together at the store. Wow. Wow. She said that she had got with him like 7 or 8 times over a span of 6 to 8 months. And so by the second go around, so this was early on when she told him how old she was. And this ninja didn't stop. He didn't turn her away. Wow. And how long? I mean, and how old were you at this time? 16. Wow. And what do you recall after the conversation with the defendant? I remember him asking me my age and me answering and me being a little nervous because I thought the age was 18, to be a consenting adult. But when I said I was 17, he said it was fine. Did there come a time when the defendant videotaped you engaging in sexual contact with him? Yes. The first time this happened, how old were you? I was 17. And was this after the conversation you had with the defendant about your age? Yes. How did it come about that the defendant videotaped you at 17 engaging in sexual contact with him? We had set a time for me to meet him at the studio. And so I was up in that same room, and he called me in the room and said that he was on his way to pick me up and that he wanted to make a video of us having sex. And that he would be there shortly. And I said, okay. And what people got to understand, even if she agreed to it, said, okay, she wrote down a piece of paper, yes, I consent to this. Legally, she can't consent at 17. It don't even matter. She's not even legal enough to say yes. And when he asked you that, what was going through your head? Well, he didn't ask me. He told me he would be there to pick me up in order to do that. And I was really scared and I really didn't want to do it, but I said, okay. Right before, last page, you guys, right before I hung up. So right after I hung up, I called my friend, Catherine. I said, he just called me and said he wants to record us having sex. And she said, get out of there. Objection, Your Honor, Mr. Kennedy. The judge sustained. What, if anything, did you do after you called your friend Catherine? I did as he asked. Why? Because I felt like I didn't have a choice. Did you see the defendant after you concluded that phone call with him? Yes. He showed up at the studio in a white van, and I got in and we drove to a house in Lincoln Park. And whose house did you understand that to be? I understood it to be his home, Mr. Kelly's home. And do you recall anything about the name of the street that house was on? I believe it started with G. I'm showing the witness what's in evidence as government exhibit 501B. Do you recognize this photograph? Yes, that's the home that we went to. What happened when you and the defendant arrived at his home near Lincoln Park? Oh, y'all, I can't stop right here. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to stop. Let me see. This is getting too good. Okay, we're gonna stop here, hopefully. We went inside and he quickly got a video camera and he directed me on where to come in. So when you walk in, there's like a little walkway there, and then you come. He wanted me to come around that, and he was filming as I came into the frame, and he instructed me to undress and told me to go over to the sofa. And did you do as he directed? I did. You said he had a video camera with him. Is that right? Yes. Where did you see the video camera? He was holding it. It was a large video camera. And do you recall what type of video camera it was? Yes. It's an old video camera that you'd have to put like a VHS. Hold on, you guys. Okay, sorry, you guys. Hold on. I'm gonna have to stop right here. It's a family emergency. Hold on, y'all. Hold on. I gotta go, y'all. Something's wrong with my brother. I gotta end this right now.